Hello everybody, this is Dr. Arunakritika, Assistant Professor, PG Department of Computer Applications and St.Joseph College of Arts and Science at Cuddalore. Now I am here to deliver the content on constructors and its types in C++. Constructors and its types in C++. Now first we will see what is a constructor. A constructor is a special type of member function that is called automatically when an object is created. Constructor is actually a member function of a class, right? It is a special method which is automatically created to call the objects. Okay. Every time an instance of a class is created, the constructor method is called. So every time you supply objects to a class, this constructor method will be called implicitly or explicitly. A constructor is a class member function used to initialize the objects of the class. It is used to initialize the objects of the class. So a class, of course, as we all know, a class can have n number of objects. So all the objects has to be initialized as in the memory. Now this work is done only using the constructor. Now it is treated as a special member function. Constructor is a special member function because it has the same name as that of the class name. So class name and the method name will be the same. In that method we define it as constructor. Of course, the class name is case sensitive. So whatever the case we are trying to use as a class name, that should be directly substituted for the constructor method. Now, so that is one rule, one important rule, that the name of the constructor should be the same as the name of the class, right? And the second rule is that a constructor does not have a return type, not even void. It doesn't have a return type at all. Let us see some unique characteristics of the constructor. A constructor is declared using public access specifier. There can be n number of member functions inside a class, but when we try defining a constructor inside a class, it should only be defined using public access specifier. All other methods can be declared either private, public or protected, but constructor has to be declared only using public access specifier. As already said, constructor has no return type. The constructor is called automatically when the object is created. Whenever we try creating an object for a class and main function, this constructor will be implicitly or explicitly called. And the next characteristic is that a constructor cannot be inherited, although the derived class can call the base class constructor. So since OOPS concept is being applied in C++, we are liable to use inheritance. So when we try using inheritance, so the base class may also have constructor methods, derived class may also have constructor methods. So whenever a base class is called inside a derived class and you try creating objects for derived class, only the derived class constructor will be called using the object and never the base class constructor will be overridden. Okay, so this is one condition. Then a constructor cannot be referred using address. So address location of a constructor cannot be referred. Okay, then another rule is that a constructor cannot be virtually defined. You cannot define a constructor method as virtual. Now we look the types of the constructors. There are 4 types of constructors in C++. The first one is non-parameterized constructor or default constructor. The second one is parameterized constructor. The other is copy constructor. The fourth one is constructor with default parameters. Now here in this video we are going to see 3 different types of constructor and how to implement these 3 different types of constructors, right? The first one is non-parameterized constructor or default constructor. As the name suggested, we do not supply any arguments for the constructor. Okay, so that type of constructor we define it as non-parameterized or default constructor. The syntax for the default constructor is name of the class as such and open and close parenthesis, and within the curly braces we write code for defining the function of the constructor. It can be anything, any manipulations can be done inside this constructor class. Now the key point is that we don't supply any arguments inside the parenthesis. Okay, right. So that's why we define this or name this particular constructor as non-parameterized constructor. Non-parameterized constructor. Then here is an example how we are trying to implement the non-parameterized constructor. So see, there is a class and we are defining a class name CALC, and inside the class we have a member variable and member function. Inside this member function declared public, we have written a constructor. See, how do we identify this as a constructor? Because the name of this method holds the same as the name of the class. So that's why we call this as a constructor, and we haven't passed any parameter inside the parenthesis. So that's why we call this as non-parameterized constructor. Now moving on to the main method. From the main method we try creating objects for the class. So class name and object. So when this object is called, it will implicitly call the constructor method. So link will be passed on to this particular constructor method and the value will be loaded in memory. So the next line, when what we have typed here is cout, that is display the value of the variable VAL. So this will give you the value called 20, that is derived from the constructor, non-parameterized constructor. This is how this constructor works. A default constructor is critically to initialize object members. So the compiler automatically provides the default constructor even if we don't explicitly define the constructor. That's why, or as already said, even if we have not written a constructor inside a class, when we try creating an object, the compiler will create an constructor and call it. Okay, so this is to initialize the objects that we have supplied for the class. The next one is the parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructors can be supplied in a class. Okay, there can be both non-parameterized constructor and parameterized constructor inside a class at a time, right? So when we try passing arguments to a function, so then that constructor function becomes parameterized constructor. Now it helps the programmers to assign values. Okay, if we need to assign any initial value for variables that we are using inside a program, that can be done using this parameterized constructor. Okay, at the time of creation of the object. Okay, we'll see an example how it works. Now, here is a class with parameterized constructor. So this is a constructor. So name of the class is the same, and we have supplied arguments. Okay, int x. So it does some manipulations inside it. Now we try to create objects for this class. So C1, C2 and C3, all these three are objects of the class. Then we are trying to supply values 10, 20 and 30 for the objects. Okay, it means that we are calling the parameterized constructor method. So this C1 of 10, this will directly, the link will go to this parameterized constructor, and the value 10 will be substituted to this variable VAL2. The same way 20 again will be substituted to x through the object called C2, and C3 object will take the value 30 to the variable called VAL2, and that's how we try displaying the values, okay, of the variable. Okay, the third type of constructor we are going to see is the copy constructor. Let's see how it works. C++ provides a particular type of constructor that takes an object as an argument and is used to copy the value of data members of one object to another. So argument is not just a value, it's not just a primitive data type value, but the argument by itself is an object. Okay, so when we try passing objects to a constructor, now that becomes a copy constructor. Okay, and this is how it is being initialized. See, class name, object, you're trying to supply another object to the parameterized constructor. Okay, so this is how we do the copy constructor. So the data that C1 holds will be directly transferred to the object called C2. The process of initialization of the objects through a copy constructor, we define it as copy initialization. Here is an example of how copy constructor works. So here we have issued an object for the created an object for the class copycon. So object is one object which takes 30 and 40 as parameters, and you have another object called object2 which is applied values from this first object. So first object has 30 and 40 as values for parameters. The same will be done in for object 2 also. So when we try displaying using this display method, object.display will display values for a and b as 30 and 40. The same way, object2.display will also display 30 and values 30 and 40 for a and b. So this is how your copy constructor works. So to summarize our data, in this particular video, we have seen what is a constructor and what are the different types of constructors in C++. Now, in this particular video, we were looking into default or non-parameterized constructor, parameterized constructor, and copy constructor. Of course, the other type constructor with the default parameter will be dealt in the next video. Hope this would have been helpful for all beginners of C++. Thank you.